All right. Hello and welcome to Hello Governor, the podcast. As always, I am Abdullah, and my guest today is introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Madeleine Norton.
So, first question is the obvious one. How did you get started and what made you want to get into voiceover?
I want to say I officially started around 2020, but I was always interested in voiceover. I think it first started watching a lot of different TV shows as a kid. I grew up watching a lot of like Power Rangers and Pokemon and Ghibli films and just even the classic Disney films. I'd always been so interested in people doing voices and animation. And I think as I got a little bit older, I started realizing that there was a lot of voiceover work being done in Dallas, which is my hometown. And I would get involved in theater productions because I started off in theater. And some of the directors I'd work with were involved in Crunchyroll, and that was something that was starting to be on my radar a little bit. And I didn't really start watching anime until kind of, yeah, I want to say the very first couple I watched were Death Note and Attack on Titan my freshman year of high school. And I was super obsessed with those, but I didn't branch out a bunch until college. But I was like, whoa, this is something that's happening. And in my mind, I was very much like, oh, you've got to be like accomplished in your career. You have to have done a bunch of things. So in my mind, I was like, oh yes, I'll try to be like these other people I know who are doing a bunch of different things, but they're like, maybe in the middle of their lives and they're very comfortable. And so that's what I kind of thought voiceover had to be. You had to be what is it, accomplished and doing a lot already. Not that that isn't the case, but I do think when the pandemic hit, things changed a little bit in terms of just obviously accessibility, which I'm sure some other people have probably mentioned to you. Um, but what is it? I guess I'm telling my whole life story. uh, I was involved as an intern in a masterclass company in New York, and that was, of course, online because it was 2020. And that being the case, they were also involving a lot of people in the film industry and the voiceover industry. And so, as soon as I saw that was something that was being done, classes being held, and things that I could partake in as a teaching assistant, I was like, sign me up. So, I was signing up for all the classes. I was able to partake in some of them being an intern. And I just really took to it very quickly. The people that I worked with, like Josh Kahn, and a little bit with Aaron Campbell, who's also in Crunchyroll, was just very positive, and it made me feel like, oh my gosh, maybe I can do this. I've been saving up for a mic and some other equipment, and so I decided, after doing a little bit of that and taking some classes, that I would just kind of try my hand at it. And at the time, I'd been obviously newly out of college, just auditioning for things, and also the pandemic had happened, so there wasn't a lot going on. So I was working as a hostess at a restaurant, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try something. I ended up being like, okay, I'm going to spend 1 year just focusing on voiceover stuff, just trying to submit things, get a demo reel set up, and just try to like build up a resume or get to know people and just try it and just see. And that's kind of what I did my whole first year and year and a half, was just really dedicated to learning as much as I could, learning how to audio edit, getting involved in audio books and indie projects and audio dramas, and eventually submitting for Crunchyroll. And I think moving back to Dallas has been really great for that, of course. And then yeah, things have just gone up from there. I'm very lucky to say. So I think it was a good move, and I'm very excited to have started being involved in voiceover earlier than I ever could have expected being a kid.
And how did you take to dubbing? Was it easy or was it hard?
I think kind of both. I'm really grateful that I started in voiceover on my own, kind of doing things in the booth and sort of learning things from the technical side as well as the recording side. Um, not had very much experience matching flaps and the just like the mouth movements in general. Um, Other than mostly, I want to say I do a lot of like reference and imitation work, I guess. Like starting off, I was just trying to see if I could copy people's voices, and it's something that I would always do as a kid too, is just imitate and mimic and make silly sounds. And also just, doing some sort of random voice for people. They'd always send me reference work. And so I'd gotten used to like listening into somebody and then trying to copy them. So I do think that helped a bit. And obviously having a theater background, I think helped. Being able to hop in on stuff and work and be able to change things up with the director when need be. But yeah, I was not expecting, I didn't really have much experience other than what I'd been told from other friends who worked at Crunchyroll about hopping in. And I didn't really realize how much of it would be cold read work and how a lot of it is kind of keeping up with the pace of churning out episodes. And so I guess every director that I've worked with so far has been a little bit different. But for the most part, they're very willing to change things up or work with me if something needs to be worked on, or if I was like, "Ooh, I didn't really like that take. Can I go again?" And I think that being in there more often has also made me feel more comfortable. Going in there the first time, I was definitely very nervous, and I feel like my fears were quelled a little bit, but I still was like, oh, I'm new here. Oh, I need to hop on it. I need to look like I belong. And I think that has just mostly come with time.
Coming from a theater background, was it difficult getting used to the dubbing process? Because it's a totally different beast as opposed to like, theater. Because I know that a lot of actors that come from a theater background have a tough time adjusting to it because again, it's a different form of acting and it's not like prelay where you can just go in and just, act. You have to like make sure that
Yeah.
everything matches up and what have you. So I'm kind of wondering, like, was there a difficulty curve for you,
There,
or was it just like, there was a difficulty curve, but then you gradually got better as you went along?
I think it was kind of a blend of both. I want to say I had been at this point in time for voiceover stuff. I'd gone from doing a lot of theater and solely theater work in college to when the pandemic hit, I was pretty much holing up at home. And even when things had gotten a little bit safer to go out, I was still spending a lot of time by myself. And that also meant I was spending a lot of time alone in the booth for like long hours at a time, especially once I started working on audiobooks. That was a lot of just like me kind of talking to myself, listening to myself for a long time. And so I think I may have gotten in that sort of isolated space of um, not needing to project as much, having to worry so much about my emotions being seen from a wider space, though it was definitely something I had to adjust to. Because I would get notes when I was being live directed about like toning it back a little bit. That, and then I want to say I've been very lucky to do film work and commercial work. Um, and though there's still been plenty of instances where I've had to ham it up a little bit. During that time, I was also getting involved in a lot more film and commercial work as opposed to theater work. So I think I ended up having kind of a reverse situation of doing a lot of theater and then getting myself toned back during the time when everybody was a little bit more isolated. And more recently, I've been involved in theater again. And I think that's always a part of me. And it's certainly something that kind of plays into everything I do. But I think I was a little lucky to have some of that side time by myself to tone it down for the camera and the mic before hopping into dubbing. It's still something I feel like watching the subs and trying to just expose myself to a lot of anime, I guess, outside of the English dubbing kind of helps get a little bit more of a perspective of where other people's heads are at for the original voice actors and things like that.
It's funny you say that because a lot of times when you're watching something subbed, you notice that a lot of Japanese seiyus have that theatrical way of acting and talking, and it's kind
Yeah.
of interesting how they manage to, what do you call it, like how they manage to make that translated and make it sound natural and
Yeah,
not like forced.
I agree. I do think that's something I talk to people about a lot with the translation between Japanese to English because it's also a whole other culture. So the way things are received, even the way that the sentence is structured is different. So I think it really is a challenge for the people who are translating and the people who are making adjustments to the script uh, to come off a certain way or sort of like how much of that is the original intent versus a bit of a translation to have English audiences on board. And I don't know. I think it's so interesting. It's almost like a little game of telephone kind of from the way that the original voice acting and script is to the way it gets translated to then it's directed and then acted out and then everybody else listens in.
And when you're dubbing, do you look at the screen or script?
I kind of do both. I found that whenever it's first being played, I guess I should say first, I always try to watch the episodes before I go in. I don't think I can just go in straight cold, even if it's like a tiny little part. I just want to be prepared. But if I go in, for the most part, I find myself kind of watching and listening to how the person is saying the lines and their intent, um, and then briefly skimming over to seeing what the lines are. And so I think it becomes almost a bit more improvised with keeping more in line with the intent and hearing how they sound, as opposed to what is it? I guess like watching and reading too much of the words because usually at least I will have watched it a couple times by myself to get the general gist and see what it is they're saying, even if it has adjusted a little bit in English. It makes me feel a little bit more familiar, like I've been reading the script a bit before going in. Um, but yeah, if it is a one line like "oh man" or "what do you think about that," I'll try to make sure I'm looking at the screen to match the flaps and things like that. I guess everybody has something different, but I've not really been, directed specifically so far. So that's what I've been doing.
But even if like you watch the sub first, it's still
Hmm.
it's that doesn't like I mean it helps, but it's not like a cheat sheet. It's not like a get out of jail free card because
Yeah,
when you're going
it's
in
not.
when you're going in, you're working off of a translated script, not the original, you know,
Yeah, it's
script.
true. It is quite a bit more improv than I would have imagined. And talking to some of my dub friends, and watching a little bit kind of behind the scenes, it seems to be that voice actors over in Japan have a little bit more time to work through the script with the director, maybe do some analysis, because they're kind of on their own schedule. And in some cases, even when I was watching like the Dandadan premiere, they were talking a little bit about even going out to get drinks and like lunch with the manga artist, which is really cool. And hearing like their interpretation and things like that. And so sometimes, you think about it and you're like, wow, yeah, we really it's almost like the Hollywood aspect of things of like, let's get it out, let's do a great job, but also let's get it out. We have to get it out in time. I'm sure it is still that case over there, but I do think about like the timing and the amount of digesting, I guess, the actors all the way on the other side of the sea get to have. It's interesting.
Yeah, because I mean, if you've listened to the show, I asked this question of people, but sometimes some people say yes, they do watch the Japanese first to get a handle of
Hmm.
what they're going to be doing, while others are like, no, I want to be like surprised. But
Yeah.
I feel like it's always funny to me that whenever someone tries to watch the Japanese first to like get a good handle of what the lines are, and then they go in and then the lines are totally different,
Surprise!
and they're like, no.
You thought, yeah. Sometimes I appreciate it because I'll be like, how am I going to read that line? And then they've translated it, and I'm like, oh, thank you. That makes a lot more sense. And then other times I'm like, oh, this actually makes it a little bit harder. I guess in some instances it would be like, they're in Makeine, I want to say, I keep wanting to pronounce it differently, but in Too Many Losing Heroines, there's this one joke about in Japanese, of course, it works because they have a word for it, but for us, the translation would be canned. And I guess the insinuation or what it means is that an author goes into quarantine and is writing and holing up and creating their works all by themselves. And it's something that we talk about in the show. And later it's played for a joke, where Anna, the one of the leading girls, is obsessed with food, and so she thinks that they're talking about like canned food, and she lists in like a group chat of like these are my favorite kinds of canned food, and I love corned beef and beans and things like that. And so it's played for a joke of like, oh, she doesn't get what canned means. Um, but because they use it in that context, we don't get to translate it to something else like, oh, let's hole up and work on this writing project, or oh, let's go quarantine together. We have to say, like, you're going to be canned. And then one of the other characters has to slyly be like, oh, isn't that when an author does this and this? To be able to be like, okay, sure, we're making it work. And it's sort of like a little inside joke inside the recording booth with the ADR engineer and the director of like, yeah, we tried our best, but this is kind of what we have to do because they play it for a joke later and they use the words, so that's what we gotta do. And sometimes it makes it a little harder.
Yeah, because and people don't want to admit this, but sometimes stuff just does not translate well when you're localizing something. It just
Yeah.
doesn't. And I get people are like, "Oh, that's why English dubs are terrible because they keep changing everything." No, it's like they're just trying to
So I
make
can
it they're
appreciate
just trying to make it
it.
I mean they're just trying to make it like accessible for a different kind of audience. And look, man,
Absolutely.
look, man, I have no issue with watching subs or dubs. I mean, I'll watch both.
Me too.
I have no issue with it. But watching a show subbed is totally different from watching something dubbed
It is.
because when you're watching something subbed, you have to like pay more attention to what's going on as opposed to if you're watching something dubbed because if you're watching something dubbed and it's a language that you already understand, it's like I can just put this on in the background. I don't have to pay too much
Absolutely.
attention.
That's what I was going to say too. I have several friends who will treat the anime more like a podcast almost if it's dubbed, because they feel like it's things that they can do while they're working on stuff, while they're cleaning or cooking, which is also very, I can appreciate that in its own light. Um, but yeah, sometimes I've had friends on both sides of the spectrum of like, no, I really want to take this in. I need to watch it sub so I can like read what the script was, what the intention was. I've been reading the manga and I want to take this in. And other people who are like, yeah, honestly, I don't want to have to think that hard. But then there's also like people on the in between of like, no, I really appreciate what this context is for the dubbing, or other people who are like, oh my gosh, yeah, I just enjoy like listening and looking at the pretty lights and colors, and even though it is in Japanese, I don't have to think that hard. So there's a balance for everybody, I think. But yeah, I can appreciate all of it. I think the more I've come to be on both sides of the screen, the booth, the mic, it makes me appreciate all of it that much more. And I love getting to learn more about it. I love hearing everybody's hot takes and getting to know more people inside the industry and outside of it as well.
And that's why like I'm in general that's why like I'm in awe of people who not only manage to give a grounded and great performance, but also like match the flaps perfectly. I'm like, because that's like such a rare talent.
It is that, and I want to say huge props definitely go to the ADR engineer because they'll speed things up and slow them down and move things left and right, just to make it work. So sometimes it'll be like, man, I don't know if that really did work, and then they'll spend like a couple seconds and play it back, and it'll be perfect. And I'll see them tweaking it, and I think that's another really cool thing. They usually do all the editing live, and it's like finished, complete for the most part of all my work by the time I've left the booth, which is so crazy. Um, but it also means it does put the pressure on sometimes because there might be some directors who are like, I really love that first take. Okay, sounds good. And if you don't feel 100% about it, then like, you have to be on your game and just feel good about the work you're doing, or also be able to just kind of let it go and be like, yeah, I think that was decent enough. I don't know. For me, being somebody who's a bit of a perfectionist and having also spent almost 2 years by myself editing things, I came from it from a perspective of like, ooh, I want that to be just perfect, or ooh, that one tiny word could have been a little bit better, but the rest of that sentence was good. And learning to be able to trust somebody else's vision and other people who've been working in the field for a long time has been like, I want to say it's been a great learning experience for me. I don't think it's been negative at all. It's, if anything, it's been making me stress out a lot less. But it is interesting that sometimes, you put something out there, and the fact of it being, um, what is it, on a streaming platform or on the internet kind of forever is very interesting. It's not something I really thought about before.
Yeah, because it's totally different now than it was, back in, the 2000s and 2010s.
Yeah,
Because
even like 10, yeah, 10 years ago.
yeah, because like in the 2000s and 2010s, like people were just like, anime was just like this, like, I don't want to say like trashy thing, but it had that
Mhm.
like B movie stigma attached to it, where
Yeah,
it's
there's
like,
there was not as much of a high standard held consistently across this nation, at least, and in America, at least, from what I understand. It was very interesting to watch that change as the pandemic set in. It was, I don't think I've seen anything grow as exponentially from a like a social societal standpoint with D&D and just nerdy things in general, like Star Wars and Marvel and DC comics and then anime. It's like all the things, in the 80s and 90s that you might have potentially been made fun of are now like the cool mainstream things to be involved in.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny because, as a teenager and kid, like I barely knew anybody who watched Dragon Ball Z, but now it's like everyone knows what Dragon Ball Z is. Like, you don't have to,
Yeah,
like,
I'm one of the people who's like left out of it. I haven't seen it.
watch Kai, because Kai is like, if you want the definitive version of Dragon Ball Z, watch Kai,
Yeah.
because it cuts out all the
Okay.
filler, and the English dub is much better than the original English dub. So,
I love that. Yeah, sometimes that's the way to go. Okay, that's great. No, I love recommendations, so I'm plugging that in for myself right now.
yeah, plus, I mean, I said this, like, I said this many times before, but like, to me, like, the Kai dub is like the definitive way to watch like Dragon Ball Z, because it's like, if you want the best version of the English dub, there you go, because all the people came back, and they got better, they got a
Oh,
lot better,
it's
and
great.
the script is much more faithful to the original translation, as opposed to, so there's no,
Mhm.
so all the weird translated mistranslation in the original anime are gone. It flows much better, so
Yeah,
it's the
they had
definitive.
more time to give it a lot of love.
Yeah, it was like, yeah, years passed, everyone knows what, all the actors knew who these characters were, so, and all the
Hmm.
people who got recast were, the replacements were, I think, much better. No offense,
Hmm.
no offense to any of the original actors, but I think that, to me, like, the Kai cast is like, what I think of when I think of that show in English anyway. So.
Yeah, it is a rare instance too where these are people who get to have watched, at least for the most part, their character go through their arc and their journey and be a part of it. Um, that is a whole thing that is interesting, and I think what also makes casting difficult sometimes is just the sometimes you're hopping into a project and the manga might not be complete. Um, and some of it, I guess, is a bit of a gamble, and that is kind of how artistry works to any extent, if you're adapting a movie from a book or anything like that. But that is kind of a rare occurrence, and I think it would be really cool to hop in and be involved in the process and then have the chance to sort of do it over again in an almost like perfected manner.
Yeah, I mean that's why like it's funny because I saw someone on like I think it was like an internet forum a couple days ago talking about like, oh, why don't they remake the original Dragon Ball? You know, why don't they give that the Kai treatment? And I'm like, because the original Dragon Ball is not as popular as Dragon Ball Z. I'm sorry, but it isn't.
Yeah.
You
That's
know.
just a fact of the matter.
So, how did you get involved in Too Many Losing Heroines? Was that an audition or was that like a call in?
It was a call in, and Helena Wallstrom, the director, had directed me only a couple times prior, and they were both additional voices for two different projects that she was working on. One was for Vampire Dormitory, and the other was for a condition called love. And Vampire Dormitory was first. I just had one little one liner as this girlfriend walking across the street. And then I may have to look back at the timing of this. I want to say it was like a week or two later that I got called in for this other part, and it was a little bit more involved. It was for a flashback segment of the main character. I was playing the main character's aunt, so I had just like a couple short lines working with her. Um, but that's another thing, I would be very interested to sit down and talk with her more about that, or the other directors in general, of how some of that works, because I'd been working a little bit more with Jerry Jewell at the time, and I'd be interested to see if there was any conference between them talking, or if it was more of her listening to my auditions, or simply just the work that I had done with her in person in the booth, um, created the decision for her to choose me in the project. And there's obviously some very talented and veteran voice actors in Too Many Heroines, but there's also some folks who I wouldn't say are just starting out, but they also have their credits are fewer in number, and they're maybe what is it? I guess involved in the voiceover scene within the last couple of years, kind of like me, and I was not expecting to have been. I was very exciting, like to get cast as a character who's in pretty much every episode, and she's hanging out with the leads the whole time, and I just really couldn't believe it. And I think what made me even more excited was actually watching the anime, of course, before going in and being like, I unironically really love the show. I would seek it out on my own and watch it, and it's really pretty and fun. And I'm definitely biased, so take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, I was very excited, and also it's a question I've kind of had myself of how did this work out? Because I know some other directors who have pulled me in have just been from auditions that I've submitted, and that just makes me feel very grateful. I know other people have been brought in for a whole number of things, and so the fact that my auditions and what I may have been doing alone in my booth was something that was at least like somewhat interesting to them to have them bring me into the booth makes me feel very grateful, and that maybe I'm doing something right. But it's been a really good experience working with her, and she's created a very welcome and safe space to have fun and feel relaxed. And the show is a very laid back sort of slice of life show, which helps. And yeah, I don't know. It's just very exciting. I'm glad I've gotten to be a part of it. And I too am a little like, whoa.
I mean, at the end of the day, for me, I'm just glad I'm seeing like a lot more new names show up in these types of
Oh,
shows because
same.
because because like I said many times before, the Dallas talent pool is really really shallow. So it's like, so it's nice to see like, different faces here and there. I mean, yeah, sure, I mean, you got your Alejandro Saabs and your
Mhm.
Alex
Yeah, he's in the show
Tiptons.
too.
Yeah, I mean, you got all those people, but it's nice to see
Of
someone
course.
that I don't recognize. It's like it's always great
Yeah.
whenever
And
I
I
look.
do think, oh, sorry, I was gonna say I do think there it's kind of like a cycle in itself of anime becoming more popular and more people becoming invested in pursuing voiceover and it being um, more of a hub for people to start moving. I have several friends of mine who I've gotten to know within this past year who've solely moved to Dallas for the voiceover scene and for Crunchyroll, and those people are starting to work there. And so I think what you're saying is really valid. And there is, yeah, I'm seeing the trend of more people moving in, so there being more national talent coming in as opposed to local. And I think a balance of both is great, you know? I'm just very lucky I get to be a local and also in it.
How do you like, because that show is more slice of life and more drama, like
Mhm.
how did you approach that character? Because, yeah, yeah, I mean, there are jokes in the show, but
Mhm.
it's very much like a serious drama at some
It
point.
is.
Yeah. So like
There's some heavy
how
stuff
do
in it.
you like as an actor, like how do you approach something like that? It's very grounded. It's not like it is an anime, but it's not like your
Mhm.
typical over the top Dragon Ball Z
Yeah.
anime. It's
I
grounded. So
think
like
it's
how
made
do
very
you
cinematically
yeah. So
and
like
in
how
that sense.
yeah. So like how do you approach that? Like how do you make sure that your performance is not only grounded but also like stays true to the character?
Yeah. I really do feel like a huge part of that is the storytelling from the uh anime aspect of things. Watching the show, the pacing is really great. And they do a good job of setting the scene and the ambiance with the original voice actors and just simply the way that the storyboarding, whatever they did to put it all together, um, kind of lends itself to that mood. So I do feel like that helps me a lot whenever I hop into the booth and I'm recording for a scene. Um, that too, yeah. There is a level of just hopping in it and committing, and a level of relating to the character. I do find that I can relate to her, being like a nerd, but also being silly and maybe not as bubbly as her, but at least eccentric and friendly. I can really relate to, and I think I don't know the way that the story is written. Um, Nukumizu's just kind of spectating everybody else's experience, and it's meant to be relatable. So I do feel like there's a piece of all the characters to take from. And when I watch the show beforehand as well, I'm always like, oh my gosh, this just happened to this character. I hope they do okay. Or, oh my gosh, they deserve so much more. And I'm lucky that my character has kind of mostly been grounded, very real, and sometimes silly. But for the one of the episodes I had, I want to say it was episode 4, where she had to, slap somebody and run away and sob a little bit. Um, Breathing helps me a ton. Being able to either inhibit or really like push forward with my breathing helps so much in the way that I want uh the intonation of the character to sound, like if she's getting choked up. Having a balance between uh the physicality of that to sound realistic, and then obviously getting invested in the scene. I've had a balance of that in my theater career as well, because I started in theater as a little kid, and so there was a segment of time where I was studying a lot of film and film acting, and I went through a method phase, and that was a very difficult time that I kind of had to find a balance in. I was very lucky that I had one director whose predominant work was in comedy, in physical work, in stage combat, and through that and another person I had in college who taught a lot of Alexander technique was finding I'm trying to find a way to I guess like word it without just like reinstating what I've said. Um, but the idea of something that was really helpful for me at least was if you're playing drunk, uh, the idea is you're trying not to be drunk. What are some elements that someone might exhibit if they're drunk and trying not to be? In the same sense of if someone's trying really hard not to cry, it kind of starts lending itself to making you feel as though you are going to cry. I guess at least for me, I'm somebody who does try to hold back my tears when I'm crying, generally. And so I feel like it creates some sort of almost like physiological reaction for me of like shortness in breath, hiccuping or straining, different things like that start kind of coming into play when I think about my breathing or the way that I might be positioned in towards the mic and the things that I'm saying too. It really helps and it kind of keeps me from getting a little too invested in the headspace of the character, I guess.
Because, as someone who watches the show, you already know that there's like a specific like scene in episode 10, which as of this recording has not been
Yeah.
dubbed. So I'm kind of
I'm very excited to dub it.
yeah, because that scene was really really like I think probably my favorite scene of the entire show because that is the first time you see her in a state of vulnerability, and it's not played for
Yeah.
laughs. It's
She's
played
kind
for
of putting on a front for a lot of the show.
yeah, and to see her like finally let her guard down and show that sense of vulnerability, but not have her look weak
No,
is
it kind of makes her more of a badass, if I'm allowed to say.
yeah, yeah, and especially the scene with the cigar. I mean, you don't see her face when she's smoking. I like to
Mm,
imagine that she's actually crying, but we don't see that. I actually I
yeah.
actually like to imagine like she broke down, but we didn't see that because again, I think it's much more
Yeah.
effective when you don't see a character crying when it's implied that they're breaking down, but they're just like.
It's true. And what is it? There's a really interesting balance. It's also part of the culture as well of how you must seem and appear to other people. But also just a sort of message in the show of these women who all could be perceived as a leading character in their own show, having moments of uh, vulnerability and I guess an idea that's not uncommon, but just this idea that anybody can be going through something and you don't even know it, and you get to see these girls that you come to love dealing with some things and how they handle it's very interesting. So I personally am so excited that I get some scenes like that because I could totally see her being a character that could be played for as a joke, and she hops in and out, and then she says peace and goes off, and that is what some of her screen time is. But the fact that she gets to have those scenes, I think, not only speaks to the writing of the light novel, but also just how I don't know the way that everything has been structured. They really spend a lot of time on each character, and they want the audience, I guess, to, and me included. I feel like an audience too when I'm watching the show. um, getting involved and invested in every character and wanting the best for all of them. And I like that my character is a little bit maybe morally gray, or she maybe sees herself as morally gray.
Yeah, because like she doesn't like because she's very much respected by her peers, but she doesn't think that
Yeah.
she is respected by her peers, and that's what I love
Yeah.
about her character is that she is very much respected by the by what's her name the girl that she ends up the
Komari?
yeah Kamari. She's very much respected by Kamari, even though she ends up with her crush. So
It's
there is
such a
that
conflicting situation.
yeah, yeah, it's such a conflicting situation. But then, like, when you finally hear her like break down and, admit that, she doesn't have her shit together, it hits
Yeah.
hard. It's like, wow.
Yeah. It also makes it feel a little bit more like a finalized in what ends up happening later for anybody going to go watch it. Um, because we get to see that initial setup with them in episodes 3 through 4-ish, where it's like, oh, great, they're friends again. But the reality of, if this were happening in real life, there's no way it would just kind of be one and done, like, oh, cool, he said no to me. I'm gonna get over it and we're best friends again and everything's great. I really like that they kind of hopped back in of maybe even if she's had time to get over her feelings, she's still very involved in their relationship inherently because she's involved with them as people outside of that. And so it reminds me a lot of my time, at least being in theater. Sometimes you date people that you end up working with later, or you're studying with people that you end up like being either friends or partners with, and sometimes those things come and go, and um, still having to be around those people and find out how to be your own person outside of that is very relatable, at least for me.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, it is very fascinating because it's not. I wouldn't call it a deconstruction of the high school genre because it is like a high school anime at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to watch like these character archetypes, get a little bit fleshed out more as opposed to like other high school anime that
Yeah.
just play them as surface level characters. It
Hmm.
is interesting. So I mean, it's it's again, because again, I don't want to like spoil too much of it because I do feel like it is one of those shows I think you should experience yourself.
Hmm.
But I think that the character relationships are what kept me interested because like again, because the character because I wasn't like a again, I wasn't a huge fan of the gimmick where it's like, oh, it's focusing on the people who lose their who get dumped and what have you, and I'm like, okay, and
Hmm.
then I watch it and I'm like, oh, okay, this seems interesting, but then
They're
as it
friends.
yeah
They're
yeah
helping each other.
yeah yeah, and then but as the show goes on and you start to get to know these characters a little bit better and you start to see like hints of what their actual personalities are like, it becomes like really
Yeah.
interesting. So I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it is probably like one of the better shows I've watched this season. So you know,
Yay! I'm so glad to hear it. And that's exactly how I feel too. I'm really lucky to be involved in a show that I also genuinely enjoy watching, which is very fun.
plus, I mean, I feel like the Japanese seiyus just like kill it in every episode, so it's like, I can just like
Yeah.
the girl playing the lead, the girl who plays Anne is really great because I love how hilarious she is
Me too.
whenever she thinks like. I love the it's cheating scene made me laugh so hard.
I know, just like her jumping from 0 to 100 is very comical.
Yeah, it's a fun show. It's I do understand that it is kind of hard to get into because again, like there are tons of scenes that just kind of feel like they're going nowhere, and if you're not the type of person who if you're the type of person who wants a little bit more action in your anime,
Mhm.
this ain't the show for you.
Yeah, if you like drama or slice of life, then this is perfect for you. I was surprised by how many dramatic developments there were in this show, even in one episode sometimes. So that was a bit surprising for me. Um, it was more dramatic than I thought it was going to be with everybody's personal lives and things like that.
Plus, I mean, how beautiful is the animation? Like it
I
looks
know.
amazing.
That's what I was gonna say was it helping with the mood is just the fact that everything is played very cinematically and how it feels like you're watching a movie helps with the pacing a ton. And then I think it also helps with, from at least the acting perspective, really getting to hop into the scenes and bring whatever it is to the character that you need to, because it does kind of feel like you're on a film set filming a movie almost.
Plus, can I just say how much I love the school uniforms with the bow ties? I
I
love that.
know, they're really cute. The rhyme or reason to them, I know not. I've been trying to figure it out. I sort of get it, but I kind of like that everybody has their own little style. I'm glad you like them. They're super cute.
And they're color coded, so you know which character is which.
Yes, exactly. You're like, oh, she's purple girl. Oh, she's blue girl. Oh, she's the green and yellow girl, and she's the red girl.
Yeah, I mean it's such a fascinating show because again, look, man, I mean I don't know if I mean look, I mean I'm sure there are going to be tons of people who don't think much of this show, and that's fine. But look, man,
Ooh, sorry.
like I mean, look, man, as someone who has watched so many garbage isekai shows, this is like a breath of fresh air for me.
I was gonna say the same thing. Isekai are great. Like, don't knock them till you try them, but they're yeah. It has been nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to just see something different every once in a while where it's like, hey, it's something new and it's not like another season of another show that I had never watched before. And I'm like, I don't, why are there so many seasons of different shows? Why can't we, it's like, ugh.
We're on season 12 already? Oh my gosh. It's an over exaggeration, but I totally get what you mean.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, I like to, again, I'm very picky when it comes to anime, but every once in a while
Hmm.
I'll randomly pick a series and be like, "Oh, what is this about? Let's
Yeah,
watch it and see if it's good or not." And
you may enjoy.
this one was probably one of the better ones I've watched this season.
Thanks. I also like how it's very aware too. There is even like the commentary on isekai or not light novels in general. It seems very aware of itself, and the fact that it is a light novel and discusses other light novels is very fun and cheeky, and I enjoy that a lot of them poking a little bit of fun at literature and manga artists and things like that.
Yeah, but it doesn't go overboard with it, which is what I like
No,
about
not
it.
at all.
If this was one of those cases where, if they were trying to do the whole self-aware thing, I'd be like,
Very.
ugh.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think the balance is very nice, and that's kind of hard to find.
yeah, because what people fail to understand is that it's not a deconstructing show. They're not like deconstructing these characters. They're not like trying to
Mhm.
subvert the high school tropes. It's just that the main character is treating everything. It's just that the main character is like a writer, and he treats everything like, he puts like narrative constructs into everyday life.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
think that's what people misunderstand is that people think that, just because the main character speaks in like, meta terms that means the show is meta, but it's not. It really isn't.
It's more, yeah, it's all created kind of from his point of view and his line of thinking, and perhaps even just like the way that he kind of views his life too. I haven't really thought too much about that. That is a very interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, because a lot of people I've seen discussion of this show being like, oh, it's trying to be meta, it's trying to deconstruct stuff, and I've
Mm,
watched every episode, and I'm like, I don't get that impression from this show. It's not like they're not trying to deconstruct any of these archetypes. I mean, the
mhm.
characters are just the characters. Like they're not like,
Yeah.
like it isn't a Madoka Magica type thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I just feel like people just completely miss the point of the show, and it's fine. It's not for everybody, but I feel like people might be turned off by the idea of like, oh, it's trying to be deconstructive because it's focusing on the characters who are like, getting dumped and what have you. But it's like, not really.
Mhm.
I mean, that's kind
No,
of
it
the
has
hook, but
some.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of the hook, but it's not like, but it's not like the whole show. I mean, that's kind of the premise, but it's not what the show is actually about, is what I'm trying to say.
Hmm.
Because
I agree.
because
It definitely
and
makes me feel like I'm going back in time a little bit. in a good way. It makes me reminiscent.
So, outside of voiceover, what are some of your personal hobbies?
Oh, well, I love listening. I feel like I'm so involved in the arts still, but I love listening to music. I love going to watch movies with friends and TV shows, binging TV shows. I also really enjoy, I did a lot more drawing when I was younger. Now it's been a little bit more painting and stitching. But I do that as well as writing on my own with poetry and playwriting, which again, sometimes, when I hopped into the voiceover thing, I was kind of saying, okay, this is going to be my main focus for a while. So I haven't hopped on these things in a little bit, but I still do them occasionally. um, but I also love being active outside if I can be biking and hiking and taking in nature and stuff like that. I enjoy it. Traveling's, of course, very fun. I come from a family who, at least both my parents traveled for work, but my mom works internationally, and so I kind of grew up in a household that celebrated taking in different cultures, trying to like explore places that are unfamiliar, and being independent. So that's kind of how I have approached things myself, and I do enjoy traveling, and would like to do that some more as I get more free time. Um, Hanging out with friends and trying food is always fun. I am somebody who enjoys keeping lists and cleaning and stuff like that. So I always find things to keep myself busy, even if I don't directly have a project going on. I'm a pretty social person. I thought at first when I was back into the pandemic that I was like, oh yeah, I could just hole up by myself for days. And as soon as things kind of opened up again and I was social with other people, I was like, no, I kind of need to be around people. I want to go out and hang out with my friends and go do fun things and talk about things that we like. So since then, I've realized I am a very social person. And so I'd like doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I think everybody had that moment post-pandemic where everyone realized, oh shit, life is really short and I gotta do all the things I
Yeah.
wanted to do quick.
Wow, kind of cool. We had that instance of like, oh, let me go out and enjoy some of the things I didn't get a chance to do during this couple years period.
Yeah, because I'm just seeing everybody like on Instagram, everyone's like getting married, having kids, and it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you wouldn't
Boom
you
season.
yeah, it's like you wouldn't have even thought about doing this, post-pandemic, but like
Oh my gosh, there's the period of time where we'd all watch those movies of anybody in a crowded space, and we'd all immediately be like, "Oh my gosh, no, no."
yeah,
And
it's just interesting like seeing people like take that leap of faith and just try to enjoy life because everyone I think realized, had that moment of realization where it's like, yeah, life is pretty short and I might as well like just do all the things I want to do now because this is it, like
yeah,
you're not gonna get a second chance, at
it's
doing all the stuff,
true.
you want to do. So, yeah.
I believe it. That's how I at least try to tackle life for the most part. I think I do a pretty decent job of it.
And what was the best and worst piece of advice you've ever been given as an actor?
Ooh. Ooh. I'm trying to think of like worst first. Like, was there a terrible piece of advice? Oh yeah. Um, I think there was one period of time where I was just kind of hopping around after senior showcase, um, being involved with, agents kind of coming and going and watching my performance after college and um, giving me insight and I I get where he was coming from with this, but I disagree. I was speaking to one person and they'd asked me what I was interested in and what I liked doing, and I was talking a lot about how I, like writing and painting and drawing and acting and voice acting and being on film and dancing and singing and all this stuff. And he was like, "Well, I don't think you're really going to make it anywhere if you spread yourself out that thin. I think you have to kind of like focus on one thing and like really go forth and do that one thing in order to like make it. And I think to a level and to an extent, I do get what he means, because if you do spread yourself out too thin, it can be that idea of master of none or whatever, where you don't really get the time to hone your crafts if you're just all over the place. But I was also, in a way, I was like, you don't know me, sir. How much time I've been dedicating to stuff. But I do think that it could be really healthy, and I encourage people to try and spread out and try and find things that they like. If there's different things that you enjoy doing that you wish to pursue, definitely pursuing them. Um, and I know, at least for me, I feel like I gained so much inspiration from artists that are celebrities as well as just historical figures who were very talented in a lot of different areas. And it's not like you have to be super talented and like you have to be an amazing singer as well as a great actor and also be painting fantastic sculptures like some of the celebrities that we see nowadays on film. I'm always just like, I can't believe this person also is in a band and has an art gallery and also acts in A-list films. But I think there's something to that, though, that this is somebody, and they might be honestly healthier for it because they're able to have outlets, and if they're artistic, they have other ways to be artistically fulfilled. Um, and I, of course, look at this from an artistic standpoint, because most of the things that I enjoy doing that I could also see myself pursuing and maybe making a living out of are also artistic in a way. But I think that applies to a lot of other stuff as well. So, in a way, maybe it wasn't the worst advice, but for me, I don't think it really applied to me, because I think I'm able to. I think I have a decent head on my shoulders. I can focus on something enough if I want to, and I've kind of proven that with the voiceover thing, where that was something I think I stuck to really hard and really focused on, and was very lucky that I was able to climb up a ladder a little bit in these past couple years. And I can't I I can't I don't want to ever overlook that, I guess. But then her best piece of advice was probably the idea that um, everybody's going to be a bit more focused on themselves, and maybe not even a bit, maybe a lot more focused on themselves than they are of you. Um, I kind of grew up in a household that was very much based on the the pride of my elders of doing well and making my parents happy. And certainly there are pros and cons to that. But I think from an early age, I kind of attacked everything from the perspective of making other people happy. And I think saying submitting to authority is maybe like the far end of that. But to an extent, especially if you're an actor, a huge part of your career is the judgment and perspective of others and where they decide to put you and how you're sort of deemed, and things kind of always seem to come at or what is it, you have to attack things kind of from a perspective of being very considerate and kind and professional in all of your interactions with the people around you. And that is certainly true. Certainly not saying to not think about those things, but at least if you're an actor, and I know many people are, if you're like me at all, it can be really hard to not either get down on yourself about how you're doing or the way you're perceived, but also what kind of work you're doing and if you're really making a difference, if it's something that you should still keep pursuing. I feel like a lot of that does go away, and a lot of the stress, at least for me, goes off my shoulders when I think about the fact that some of those people that I might be really trying to garner respect from are far more worried about the things going on in their life. And if, somebody didn't say hi to you in passing and you're worried that they're never going to cast you again, or that they don't like working with you, in reality, they may have been thinking a lot about their taxes that day, or the fact that they got yelled at on the street by some random passerby, or even just the fact of the matter that they're like really preoccupied that their partner's birthday is tomorrow or something like that. You just never know. Um, and so I think that's probably the best advice I've been given just from a personal standpoint. It's applied a lot to my life, and it's something almost like a mantra for me that I have to remind myself of, that all the true worth that I should feel for myself comes from me and not from other people. And that if you're somebody who thinks a lot or overthinks, that there's a way to have a healthy balance of that through maybe that kind of line of thinking.
Oh no, I can totally relate because I did go through that period in my life where I tried so hard to really impress people and try to like,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to, I had that period in my life where it's like I wanted everyone to like me. I wanted to be everybody's friend. I tried so hard and it just came off as like very, I don't want to say fake, but it definitely came off as put on.
It can be, yeah. I realized that a lot from my time in high school. I talked to friends of mine from high school that are still my friends now, and they certainly hadn't said anything, but they'd, I guess, just, I'd talked about the fact that it didn't even feel like I could really get to fully know people because of there's just a level of trying to be chipper and happy to everyone that you can't be real.
And I sometimes worry about that, when I'm doing the podcast because like, I want to like, not only talk to people, but I also want to, have a good conversation, I want to have fun, I try to keep things lighthearted, I try to not to, dwell on the negative stuff, but it is hard, it is very hard and
No, you're good. Keep going.
uh,
I'm interested.
no,
I'm invested.
no. I mean, it's basically what I'm saying is like it's kind of tough to, like balance. What do you call it? Trying to be authentic. It's tough. Trying to be authentic and
Yeah,
trying to be authentic and please people at the same time is just like a
I
tough
know.
balancing act that
As an
none of us
actor
can.
too, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I think everybody kind of balances it to some extent, or has to balance it to some extent.
Yeah. Anyway, before we wrap this up, can you give us an update on what you're currently working on and where can people find you online?
Yeah, you're more than welcome to find me online on IMDb, my personal website, which is just my first and last name, as well as now I'm seeing my name come up on the anime wiki and things like that, and behind the voice actors, which is really cool. Um, I'm kind of everywhere. I feel like if you look on Twitter or YouTube or anything like that, I'll be there. Um, Currently, it's mostly just been working on these projects, auditioning for as many as I can. I do several audiobooks on Audible, and I'm working on a couple of sequels to ones that I've released in the past couple years, actually, that should be coming out in the next couple months. One for Under Bethel, and another one for Ellis River, which received an award for Best Audiobook Fiction with the Benjamin Franklin Awards, which was really cool. Um, insert. So that's I guess what I've been up to. And then if you're local, um, I have been involved from the education standpoint with Shakespeare Dallas and am working on their Shakespeare Dallas school tour, which is really fun. So I'm just hopping around to different schools and performing and teaching Shakespeare, which I also really love.
Again, thank you so much for taking the time off to do this. This has been a lot of fun, and
Of
we
course.
we got to get you back on here because I hate when we have to cut this short, but yeah, it is
I
what it
know.
is.
I apologize. I'm so grateful that you got a chance to talk with me about these things. And I think anybody who, I don't know, when we have shared interests, it makes podcasts and even just talking to one another that much more fun.
Yeah. Anyway, take care, and hopefully I'll talk to you sometime soon. Okay. Bye
Yes,
bye.
thank you so much. I had fun.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.